The shuttle touched down on the purple soil of Prime, and Ho felt his stomach turn. He was not a diplomat. He was not a soldier. He was just an engineer who had been chosen for this mission because he could fix anything with his hands. The needed human technology and humans needed crystals. It was a simple trade, but nothing about this world was simple. Commander Park stood at the front of the shuttle and addressed the 12 humans who would live on this alien world for the next 6 months. Her face was serious, and her voice was cold. "Listen carefully," she said. "They have many laws, break one and they will kill you. There will be no trial, there will be no mercy. The most important law is this: you must never speak to the Queen, you must never look at her directly. You must never acknowledge her presence in any way. If she enters a room, you bow your head and stay silent until she leaves. Do you understand?" Everyone nodded. Ho nodded too, but he did not really understand. Why would a queen make a law that forbids people from talking to her? It seemed lonely. It seemed strange. But he kept his thoughts to himself. There were tall beings with silver skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were large and completely black, like pools of dark water. They moved with grace, and they rarely showed emotion on their faces. When the humans walked out of the shuttle, a group of guards was waiting for them. The guards did not speak. They simply pointed toward a large building made of white stone. That building became their home for the next several weeks. Ho worked in the lower levels, fixing machines and studying technology. The work was interesting and he learned quickly. The engineers were impressed by his skills. They called him the one with clever hands in their language. Ho liked that name. But life on Prime was not easy. The humans were treated like servants. They ate separately from They walked in different hallways. They were not allowed in certain parts of the palace, and always there were guards watching them. One evening, Ho was called to fix a broken communication device in the main hall. This was unusual. Humans were rarely allowed in the main hall, but the device was important and no engineer could repair it. So Ho gathered his tools and followed the guard. The main hall was beautiful. The ceiling was made of crystal and light poured through it in many colors. The walls were covered with paintings of history, and at the far end of the hall there was a throne made of silver and gold. On that throne sat Queen. Ho had seen pictures of her before. She was the ruler of the entire empire, which covered 17 star systems. She was said to be over 300 years old, though she looked young by human standards. Her silver skin was smooth, and her 4 arms rested gently on the sides of her throne. She wore a crown of black crystals, and her dark eyes stared straight ahead at nothing. Ho remembered the commander's words. He dropped his gaze immediately and walked toward the broken device. His hands were shaking. He could feel the Queen's presence like a weight on his shoulders. The room was completely silent except for his footsteps. He knelt beside the device and opened his toolbox. The problem was simple. A small crystal had cracked, disrupting the energy flow. He could fix it in 10 minutes. He focused on his work and tried to forget where he was. But then something strange happened. He felt someone watching him. Not the guards, not the servants, someone else. He could feel eyes on his back studying him with curiosity. Without thinking, he looked up. Queen was staring directly at him. Their eyes met for just 1 second. One single second. But in that moment, Ho saw something that shocked him. Behind her royal mask, behind her cold expression, he saw loneliness. Deep, terrible loneliness. The kind that comes from never being touched. The kind that comes from never hearing your own name spoken with warmth. Then a guard shouted something in. Ho dropped his gaze and returned to his work. His heart was beating fast. He had broken the law. He had looked at the Queen. But no one came to arrest him. No one came to hurt him. The moment passed and everything continued as before. He finished the repair and left the main hall as quickly as possible. When he returned to the human quarters, he went straight to his small room and sat on his bed. His hands were still shaking. He could not forget her eyes. He could not forget that look of loneliness. For the next several days, Ho thought about the queen often. He watched the court from a distance and noticed things that others did not see. When the queen walked through the palace, everyone stopped moving. Everyone stopped talking. They bowed their heads and became like statues. No one smiled at her. No one spoke to her. Even her own advisors communicated with her through written messages. She was surrounded by thousands of people, but she was completely alone. Ho asked one of the engineers about this. The engineer, whose name was, seemed uncomfortable with the question. "The queen is sacred," explained. "She is above all other beings. To speak to her directly would be to claim equality with her. This is forbidden. It has always been forbidden. It is our oldest law." "But does she ever talk to anyone?" Ho asked. Shook his head. "She speaks only during official ceremonies, and even then she speaks to the air, not to any person. No one has heard her voice in private conversation for over 200 years. Ho felt something heavy in his chest. 200 years without a real conversation. 200 years without someone asking how she felt. 200 years without a friend. He returned to his room that night and lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. The stars shone through his small window. They were beautiful, but they felt cold. He wondered if Queen ever looked at those same stars from her throne room. He wondered if she ever wished that someone would just talk to her like a normal person. He wondered if she remembered the human engineer who had looked into her eyes for one brief second. He did not know that his questions would soon be answered. He did not know that his life was about to change forever. Outside his window, the purple moon rose over the palace, and somewhere in the royal chambers, a queen was making a decision that would break every rule she had ever followed. 3 weeks passed since Ho looked into the queen's eyes. He returned to his normal routine. He fixed machines. He studied technology. He ate his meals alone in his small room. The incident in the main hall seemed like a distant dream, something that had happened to a different person in a different life. But he still thought about her. At night, when the palace was quiet and the purple moon hung low in the sky, Ho would sometimes stand by his window and wonder what the queen was doing. Was she sleeping? Was she sitting alone in her vast chambers? Did she ever think about the human who had dared to meet her eyes? These were foolish thoughts, he told himself. She was a queen who ruled 17 star systems. He was just an engineer from a small planet. They lived in different worlds, even though they stood on the same ground. One night, everything changed. Ho was sleeping when he heard a soft sound at his door. It was not a knock. It was more like a gentle scratch, as if someone was trying to get his attention without making too much noise. He opened his eyes and listened. The sound came again. He got out of bed and walked slowly to the door. His heart was beating fast. Visitors at night were not normal on Prime. The guards did their rounds at specific times, and they never stopped at the human quarters. He pressed his hand against the door panel, and it slid open. Queen stood in the darkness of the hallway. For a moment, Ho could not move. He could not think. The ruler of the empire was standing outside his room in the middle of the night, wearing a simple gray robe instead of her royal clothes. Her crown was gone. Her 4 arms hung at her sides, and her dark eyes were looking directly at him. "May I enter?" she asked. Her voice was soft and clear, like water running over smooth stones. It was the first time Ho had heard her speak outside of official ceremonies. It was the first time anyone had heard her speak like this in 200 years. Ho stepped aside without saying a word. The queen walked into his small room and looked around. There was not much to see. A bed, a desk, a chair, some tools on the floor, but she studied everything with great interest as if she was visiting a museum. "Close the door," she said. Ho closed the door. His hands were shaking. He did not know if he was dreaming. He did not know if this was some kind of test. He did not know what to say. Queen turned to face him. In the dim light of the room, she looked different, smaller, more fragile, more human if such a word could be used for an alien. You looked at me, she said. In the main hall, you looked into my eyes. Ho bowed his head. I am sorry, Your Majesty. I did not mean to break the law. I will accept any punishment you. Stop. He stopped. Look at me, she commanded. He looked at her. Why did you look at me, she asked. Were you not afraid? Were you not taught the rules? Ho thought about his answer carefully. He could lie. He could say it was an accident, that he had simply looked up without thinking. But something in her eyes told him that she wanted the truth. She needed the truth. I felt you watching me, he said. And when I looked up, I saw that you were lonely. I saw sadness in your eyes. I have thought about it every day since then. The queen was silent for a long moment. Then she did something that shocked Ho more than her visit. She sat down on his bed, like a tired traveler resting after a long journey. No one has spoken to me like this in 200 years, she said. No one has looked at me and seen me. They see the crown, they see the throne, they see the power, but they do not see me. Ho did not know what to do. Standing felt wrong. Sitting felt wrong. Everything felt wrong and right at the same time. Sit, she said, pointing to the chair at his desk. He sat. Tell me about your world, she said. Tell me about humans. Tell me something true. And so Ho talked. He talked about Earth with its blue oceans and green forests. He talked about his childhood in a small town where everyone knew everyone. He talked about his mother, who made the best food in the world, and his father, who taught him how to fix things with his hands. He talked about human laughter, human tears, human love. The queen listened to every word. She asked questions, simple questions. What does rain feel like? What do friends do together? What does it mean to hug someone? These were things that every human child knew, but the queen had never experienced them. Hours passed. The purple moon moved across the sky, and for the first time in centuries, Queen smiled. It was a small smile, just a slight curve of her lips, but to Ho, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. I must go, she said finally. The guards will notice if I am gone too long, but I want to come back. I want to talk more. Will you allow it? Ho knew that he should say no. He knew that this was dangerous. If anyone discovered that the queen was visiting a human servant in the middle of the night, they would both be in terrible danger. But when he looked into her dark eyes, he could not refuse. Yes, he said, you can come back whenever you want. The queen stood up and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back to look at him. My people call me queen, she said. My advisors call me your majesty, but I have not heard my own name spoken by another voice in so long that I have almost forgotten what it sounds like. Ho said softly. The queen closed her eyes for a moment, as if the sound of her name was music that she wanted to remember forever. Thank you, she whispered. Then she was gone. Ho stood alone in his room for a long time after she left. His heart was still beating fast. His mind was full of questions. What had just happened? What would happen next? Was he falling into something wonderful or something terrible? He did not have the answers, but he knew one thing for certain. Tonight, a queen had become a person. And tonight, a simple engineer had become the keeper of the most dangerous secret in the galaxy. Outside, the stars continued to shine, cold and distant. But inside that small room, something warm had begun to grow. The queen came back the next night, and the night after that, and the night after that. Every time the purple moon rose high in the sky, Ho would hear that soft scratch at his door. He would open it, and there she would be, wearing her simple gray robe, her dark eyes full of questions. She would slip into his room like a shadow, and they would talk until the first light of dawn painted the crystal ceiling of the palace. Ho taught her many things. He taught her about music. Human music was different from songs. It had rhythm that made your body want to move. He hummed old melodies that his mother used to sing, and the queen listened with her eyes closed. She said the sounds made her feel warm inside, like something was waking up after a long sleep. He taught her about laughter. This was difficult because they did not laugh. They had no word for it in their language. But one night, Ho told her a silly story about a time when he accidentally fell into a river while trying to catch a fish. He acted out the scene, waving his arms and making surprised faces. And suddenly, a strange sound came from the queen's mouth. It was her first laugh. It was awkward and uncertain, but it was real. She covered her mouth with two of her hands, shocked by what she had done. "What was that?" she asked. "That was laughter," Ho said, grinning. "That was joy escaping from your heart." She laughed again, and this time it was easier. He taught her about friendship. On Prime, relationships were based on rank and duty. People served each other because they had to, not because they wanted to. The idea of choosing to spend time with someone simply because you enjoyed their company was strange to her, but slowly she began to understand. "So a friend is someone who asks nothing from you," she said one night. "A friend is someone who gives everything to you," Ho corrected gently. "Not because they must, but because they want to, and you give everything back. That is how friendship works." The queen was quiet for a moment. Then she placed one of her silver hands on his arm. Her skin was cool and smooth, like polished metal. "Are we friends?" she asked. Ho looked at her hand on his arm. He looked at her dark eyes, which had changed so much since their first meeting. There was light in them now. There was life. "Yes," he said, "we are friends." As the weeks passed, their bond grew stronger. Ho looked forward to their nightly meetings more than anything else in his life. During the day, he worked and pretended that everything was normal, but at night, he was alive. At night, he had something precious that no one else in the galaxy had. He had the Queen's trust. But danger was growing around them. Lord, the Queen's chief advisor, was a cold and suspicious creature. He had served the royal family for over 100 years, and he guarded his power jealously. He noticed that the Queen had changed. She seemed distracted during council meetings. She smiled at strange moments. She asked unusual questions about human customs and emotions. Did not like these changes. He began to watch the Queen more closely. He assigned extra guards to follow her movements. He questioned the servants about anything unusual they had seen. One night arrived at Ho's room later than usual. She looked worried. "Is suspicious," she said as soon as the door closed. "He questioned me today about why I seem different. I told him nothing, but he does not believe me. He has spies everywhere in the palace." Ho felt cold fear in his stomach. "Should we stop meeting?" The Queen shook her head firmly. "No, I will not give this up. These nights with you are the only real moments in my life. Everything else is ceremony and duty and loneliness. I cannot go back to that." Ho understood. He felt the same way, but he was also afraid. "We must be more careful," he said. "We cannot let anyone discover us." They agreed to change their routine. The Queen would not come every night, only when she was certain that no one was watching. Ho would leave a small signal on his window when it was safe for her to visit. They created secret codes and hidden messages. They became like two spies in a war, except their enemy was not another nation but loneliness itself. Despite the danger, their friendship continued to grow. One night, asked Ho to teach her a human game. He chose a simple card game that children played on Earth. They sat on the floor of his small room, and he dealt the cards between them. "The goal is to collect pairs," he explained. "When you get a pair, you put it down and say the name of the pair. The person with the most pairs at the end wins." "What do I receive if I win?" asked. Ho thought about this. The winner gets to ask the loser one question, and the loser must answer honestly. Like this rule. She was very competitive, Ho discovered. Her 4 arms gave her an advantage in holding cards, and she learned the strategy quickly. By the end of the night, she had won 3 games to his 2. "I have earned 3 questions," she said proudly. "Ask them." She thought carefully. First question, do you miss your home? Every day, Ho answered, but less now than before. Second question, are you afraid of what will happen if we are discovered? Yes, but I am more afraid of never seeing you again. Was quiet. Her third question took a long time to come. Third question, when you look at me, what do you see? Ho looked at her silver skin and her dark eyes and her 4 graceful arms. He looked at the queen who ruled 17 star systems, who commanded millions of soldiers, who had lived for 300 years. And then he looked deeper. I see, he said simply, I see my friend. The queen did not cry, could not produce tears, but something in her face broke and healed at the same time. She reached out with all 4 of her arms and pulled Ho into an embrace. It was awkward and strange and wonderful. Thank you, she whispered against his shoulder. Thank you for seeing me. They stayed like that for a long time, 2 souls from different worlds, holding onto each other in the darkness. Neither of them noticed the shadow that moved past the window. Neither of them saw the figure that hurried away through the night, carrying a terrible secret to Lord. The trap was closing around them, and they did not even know it. The guards came for Ho at dawn. He was sleeping when his door burst open, and 6 soldiers rushed into his room. Before he could speak, before he could even understand what was happening, they grabbed his arms and pulled him from his bed. They put chains on his wrists and ankles, heavy chains made of black metal that burned against his skin. What is this? Ho shouted. What have I done? No one answered. The guards dragged him through the palace hallways, past other humans who watched with terrified eyes, past servants who turned away so they would not see. Ho's bare feet scraped against the cold stone floor. His heart was pounding so hard that he thought it might break through his chest. They brought him to the great hall, the same hall where he had first seen the queen. But now the hall was different. It was filled with hundreds of nobles, all dressed in their finest robes. At the center of the hall stood a platform, and on that platform was a single post made of dark wood. They tied Ho to that post. Lord stepped forward from the crowd. His silver face showed no emotion, but there was something dark and satisfied in his black eyes. He held a scroll in one of his 4 hands and raised it high so everyone could see. People of the Empire announced, we have discovered a great crime. This human, this creature from a primitive world has violated our most sacred law. He has spoken to the queen, not once but many times, in secret, in the darkness of night. He has corrupted her with his alien ideas and his foreign customs. A gasp went through the crowd. Whispers spread like fire. Ho looked around desperately for any friendly face, any hope of rescue. He saw Commander Park among the human delegates. Her face was pale with horror, but she could do nothing. Any attempt to interfere would mean war between Earth and the Empire. The punishment for this crime is death, continued. The human will be executed at sunset. His body will be burned, and his ashes will be scattered in the void of space, so that nothing remains of his existence. Ho felt all strength leave his body. Death. He was going to die. He had known the risk, but he had never truly believed this moment would come. He thought of his parents on Earth who would never know what happened to their son. He thought of the blue oceans he would never see again. He thought of, where was she? Why had she not come? As if in answer to his question, a door at the far end of the hall opened. Queen entered, wearing her full royal clothes and her crown of black crystals. She walked slowly through the crowd, and everyone bowed their heads as she passed. She climbed the steps to her throne and sat down. She did not look at Ho. Her face was the same cold mask she had worn before their first meeting. It was as if the woman who had laughed in his room, who had held him in her 4 arms, had never existed. Ho's heart broke. Your Majesty, said, bowing deeply, the criminal awaits your judgment. Do you approve the sentence of death? This was the moment. Could save him with a single word. She was the queen. Her power was absolute. All she had to do was speak. She did not speak. The silence stretched on and on. Ho stared at her, willing her to look at him, willing her to remember their nights together, their conversations, their friendship. But she sat perfectly still, like a statue made of silver. "Your Majesty," prompted. "Still nothing." Smiled. "The Queen's silence is her approval. Guards, take the criminal to the execution chamber and prepare him for." "No." The word was quiet, but it echoed through the hall like thunder. Everyone turned to look at the throne. Queen had risen to her feet. "No," she said again, louder this time. "I do not approve." Smile disappeared. "Your Majesty, the law is clear. He spoke to you. He must die." "The law is wrong." Another gasp from the crowd. The law was sacred. The law had existed for thousands of years. The law could not be wrong. Stepped down from her throne. She walked past the shocked nobles, past the terrified servants, past the confused guards. She walked straight to the platform where Ho was tied and stood beside him. "This man is not a criminal," she said, her voice strong and clear. "He is my friend. He is the only person in 300 years who has spoken to me with honesty. He is the only one who has seen me as something more than a crown and a throne. He has committed no crime except the crime of treating me like a person." Stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. "Your Majesty, you are not well. This human has poisoned your mind with his alien ideas. You must." "Must?" Thighs flashed with something dangerous. "You dare to tell me what I must do? I am the Queen, I am the law, and I say this man will not die." She raised one of her hands and her guards immediately surrounded her. But they did not move against Ho. They moved to protect him. "This is treason," hissed. "The council will not allow this. The people will not accept a queen who breaks her own laws for a human." Looked at with cold fury. "The people have never known me. They have never heard my voice outside of ceremonies. They have never seen my face without a mask of duty. But that changes today." She turned to face the crowd. Hundreds of nobles stared at her with shock and confusion. "For 200 years I have been your silent queen," she said. "I have followed every law, performed every ritual, fulfilled every duty, but I have been alone. I have been lonely in ways that none of you can understand. This human showed me that there is another way to live. He showed me kindness without conditions. He showed me friendship without fear, and I will not let him die for that gift." She reached out and touched Ho's face with her silver hand. It was the first time she had touched him in public. It was the first time any queen had touched a commoner in the history of the empire. "I choose him," she said simply. "I choose friendship over tradition. I choose connection over isolation. And if that makes me unfit to be your queen, then perhaps I never wanted to be queen at all." Ho looked at her with tears in his eyes. She had given up everything for him. Her throne, her power, her entire world, all for the chance to be his friend. He whispered. She smiled at him, that same small smile he had seen on the first night she visited his room. "I am not afraid anymore," she said. Lord stepped forward one last time, his face full of rage. "This is not over. The council will." "The council will do nothing," a new voice said. Everyone turned. An old woman was pushing through the crowd, her silver skin wrinkled with age, her movements slow but determined. She wore the robes of a high priestess, and the nobles parted before her with deep respect. "High Priestess Myra," said, his voice suddenly uncertain, "surely you must agree that this is wrong." The old woman looked at the queen standing beside the human prisoner, and then she looked at. "I have served the crown for 400 years," Myra said slowly, "and in all that time I have never seen a queen who looked truly alive, until now." She turned to face the crowd. "The law of silence was created to protect the royal family from corruption, but it has created only isolation and pain. Perhaps it is time for a new way." The hall fell silent. The balance of power was shifting and everyone could feel it. Ho looked at and she looked at him. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The days that followed were the most difficult in history. Lord tried to raise support against the queen. He called meetings with the noble families. He spread rumors about human corruption and alien influence. He claimed that had gone mad and must be removed from the throne for the good of the empire. But something unexpected happened. The people began to listen to their queen instead. Did not hide in her throne room. She walked through the streets of the capital city, talking to ordinary for the first time. She asked them about their lives, their problems, their hopes. She laughed with their children. She held the hands of the elderly, and everywhere she went, Ho walked beside her. The people had never seen anything like it. For thousands of years, the royal family had been distant gods, untouchable and unknowable. Now their queen was standing in marketplaces, eating street food, asking shopkeepers about the price of vegetables. It was strange. It was shocking. It was wonderful. She seems so normal, one young woman said, watching the queen talk to a fruit seller. She seems real. She is real, her friend replied. She always was, we just never saw it before. Within weeks, popularity grew beyond anything the nobles had expected. The common people loved her openness. They loved her honesty. And they loved the message she was spreading. That connection was more important than tradition, and friendship was more powerful than fear. Lord saw his power slipping away. In desperation, he made one final attempt to destroy the queen. He called for a formal vote in the High Council, demanding that be removed and replaced with a new ruler who would respect the old ways. The vote was held in the Great Hall, the same hall where Ho had faced execution just weeks before. Every noble family sent representatives. Every priest and priestess attended. The humans from the diplomatic mission were allowed to watch from the upper balcony. Stood before the council, wearing her crown of black crystals for what might be the last time. Beside her stood Ho, now dressed in the blue robes of a royal advisor. It was a title had created just for him. Members of the High Council began, we are here to decide the future of our empire. Our queen has broken our most sacred law. She has befriended an alien creature. She has walked among commoners like a servant. She has abandoned the dignity of her position. I ask you, is this the queen we want? Is this the future we choose? Many of the older nobles nodded in agreement. They valued tradition. They feared change. They did not understand why anyone would want a queen who laughed and talked and touched people like an ordinary person. Then spoke. Lord speaks of tradition, she said, her voice calm and clear. He speaks of dignity and position and sacred laws, but he does not speak of what truly matters. He does not speak of happiness. He does not speak of connection. He does not speak of love. She paused and looked around the hall at the faces watching her. I have lived for 300 years, she continued. I have ruled 17 star systems. I have commanded armies and signed treaties and made decisions that affected billions of lives. But until I met this human, I did not know what it meant to be alive. I knew duty. I knew ceremony. I knew loneliness. But I did not know joy until someone dared to break the law and speak to me as an equal. She reached out and took Ho's hand. The hall fell completely silent. Humans are strange creatures, said with a small smile. They are weak compared to us. They live such short lives. They feel everything so deeply that it sometimes destroys them. But they have something we have forgotten. They have the courage to connect. They have the wisdom to value each other. They have the strength to love without fear. She turned to face directly. You ask if I am the queen this empire wants. I do not know the answer, but I know what kind of queen I want to be. I want to be a queen who speaks to her people. I want to be a queen who listens and laughs and cries. I want to be a queen who is not alone. High Priestess Myra stood up from her seat. Her old voice filled the hall. I call for the vote, she announced. All those who wish to remove Queen from the throne, raise your hands. Raised his hand immediately. Several of the older nobles did the same. Ho counted them with a sinking heart. There were many, too many. All those who wish Queen to remain on the throne, raise your hands. More hands went up. The younger nobles, the priests who had been moved by her words, the representatives from distant planets who had heard stories of the queen who walked among her people. And then, slowly, more hands rose. Nobles who had been undecided. Nobles who were afraid of change but more afraid of returning to the cold silence of the past. High Priestess Myra counted carefully. The hall held its breath. "The vote is decided," Myra announced. "Queen will remain on the throne." A cheer erupted from the back of the hall, where the common servants had gathered to watch. It spread through the crowd like a wave, growing louder and louder until even some of the nobles joined in. Lord stood frozen, his face twisted with disbelief and rage. Squeezed Ho's hand and smiled at him. He smiled back, his eyes bright with tears of relief and joy. That night the Queen made a proclamation that echoed across all 17 star systems of the Empire. The law of silence was abolished. From this day forward, anyone could speak to the royal family. Anyone could share their thoughts, their concerns, their hopes and dreams. The wall between the crown and the people had fallen, but was not finished. She announced a new treaty with Earth, one based on true partnership rather than servitude. Humans would no longer be silent workers in the corners of the palace. They would be teachers, advisors, friends. The two species would learn from each other and grow together. And in a final act that shocked and delighted the Empire, she appointed Ho as her first friend, a new title that carried no official power but enormous symbolic meaning. He would stand beside her throne, not as a servant, but as an equal. That night, after all the ceremonies were finished and all the crowds had gone home, and Ho stood together on the balcony of the palace. The purple moon hung low in the sky, just as it had on the night she first came to his room, but everything else had changed. "Are you happy?" Ho asked. Looked at him with her dark eyes, the eyes that had once seemed so lonely and sad. Now they were full of light. "I do not think I understood what happiness meant until I met you," she said. "You taught me that life is not about power or tradition or following rules. Life is about connection. Life is about finding someone who sees you truly and loves you anyway." Ho put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned against him, her silver skin cool against his warmth. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for breaking the rules." He smiled and looked up at the stars, the same stars that had seemed so cold and distant when he first arrived on this world. Now they seemed like old friends, watching over two people from different worlds who had found something precious in each other. "Thank you for letting me," he said. They stood there together as the first light of a new dawn began to paint the sky. Behind them, an empire was waking up to a different future, and ahead of them lay all the adventures that come when two souls decide to walk through life together. It was not the ending anyone had expected, but it was the beginning of something beautiful.